Do you think your job has nothing to do with your faith? Think again. This episode is all about young Catholic professionals on Spirit Inspire, starting right now.
Broadcasting from the Cathedral of the Assumption in Louisville, Kentucky, this is Spirit Inspire. And now, here is your host.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Spirit Inspire. I'm your host, John Soul. Joined with me as my co-host, Vincent Ricketts.
Hello.
There he is again, saying hello. One word answer every single time. No, I love messing with you occasionally, and I'm sure you do as well. Yes? No? Okay. Moving on. So we have two great guests with us today. Jose Rodriguez, who is the Director of Outreach for Young Catholic Professionals, and Greg Buccola, who is the Board Chair of Young Catholic Professionals. Welcome, guys. Thanks for being on the show.
Oh, my gosh. That's awesome.
Thanks for having us.
This is great. So we always like to let the audience kind of get to know the guests whenever we have someone on, just to kind of know your heart, your faith journey, where you came from, what got you involved in the church, and specifically in your ministry with Young Catholic Professionals, which we'll spend a lot of time talking about. So whoever wants to go first, because we don't always have two guests on our show. This might be one of the first, if not the first time.
Okay. I was just asking you about.
Yeah. So I'm born and raised in Southern California.
Awesome.
Something we actually share. Born and raised there, and grew up one of 7 kids, 6 boys, 1 girl. I have a twin brother as well, and had an amazing upbringing. My twin brother and I were we made money as kids serving 5 weddings every Saturday for about 4 years, and paid for our CD collections. 9 o'clock, 10:30, noon, 1:30, and 3 every Saturday, and it was an amazing ride. Just a little fun nugget.
That's
and
awesome.
But yeah, was really fortunate to kind of be an outlier family in Southern California in that environment, and it was interesting. And we'll talk about later, is that my faith life and home life was very different from my school upbringing, and it was almost like 2 different worlds that we had to very carefully keep separate, and there was very little integration in the two, and that was just normal in California. So long fast forward, in high school, I had cancer, and very fortunate, best thing I ever had, and when I was 19. And it was in that moment, sitting in the hospital, and I had to take a tiny little pill. And it was in that moment, it was so clear to me that there must absolutely be a God, because their body is so perfect.
Yeah.
It is so fragile that this little pill is what I need to
Live.
Yeah. And so that really started more of a process of being more devout and exploring, how do I have a relationship that is fervent and ardent. And so I married a Bardstown girl, and we were married in Bardstown and relocated to Louisville in 2011. Been here ever since. We have 4 kids, all adopted, and so much more I could talk about, but
Sure.
It's been an amazing ride, and I love Louisville.
It's a great place. It is. Crystal, my wife, and I got to go to an adoption workshop that you all were part of last year. It was a couple months before my wife conceived. So it's funny, you open your heart up to these kids, and it was something your wife said, I think, that was so powerful. It's like she always wanted to have a child for her family, but it was really the realization of you're giving your family to a child, which really touched my heart and really helped me. So let her know that.
That's incredible.
It is a gift. So you all are a great family. So thanks for being here.
Thank you.
Great. So Jose.
Yeah, I am new to Louisville. I've been here for a few months now. Originally from Southern California as well. Grew up, born and raised Anaheim. I am the oldest of 4 boys, old boys. So I have 3 boys now, so I joke around with people. I'm like, it's kind of a daily exercise of making sure, like, my boys don't, like, throw each other through the drywall. So I felt like probably put my poor parents through the same a little bit. So I grew up 4 boys, Catholic upbringing. My mom was like one of 11. My dad is like one of 8. So we all kind of lived in the same neighborhood. So it was great. We'd all kind of go to church together, go to mass together. It's funny, like, people would joke around with me and say things like, Jose, like, everyone in CCD is your cousin, and I'd be like, no, that's not right. And I'd look around and like half the class were related to me. All right, this is funny, but it's not. So that's kind of the environment that I grew up in. I would say religiously, like my folks were more like, I think like in the 90s in Southern California, especially around like Mexican American, Spanish speaking Catholics, charismatic renewal was kind of a big thing. So kind of grew up around that flavor of prayer. I remember going to mass, going to a charismatic prayer meeting for 3 hours as a 9-year-old, and just sitting in my chair and everyone's praying and I'm just there for the ride. So that was kind of my upbringing. And then really it wasn't until I was like 16, say the summer between my junior year and sophomore year, that really kind of had what I'd call a coming to Christ. It was kind of going through, just I think, a lot of folks kind of go through kind of the teenage angst, starting to have a lot of questions, a lot of things like that. And just kind of had an experience with the Eucharist where I just could not deny what I'd experienced. Like my life just changed radically almost overnight. So, I went from being like this dumb jock, not to say that I'm not that anymore, but, but to like, binge watching EWTN, Catholic radio. I mean, like 3 rosaries a day. I remember like even adults were concerned about what was happening to me. I remember like coaches would be like, what are you doing with your life? I'm like, I don't know, it's just these beads. I mean, even my parents. So, it's interesting. It's funny. I've had various conversations with folks who like, came into their faith in their young adult years or their teenage years. And I feel like that's for some reason, like a common experience that parents say, and I guess like out of concern and like guard for their kids, but it's like, did you join a cult? Like what happened? Not to say that my parents were like at that level, but they were definitely concerned, like what is happening with my son. So that kind of kickstarted this faith journey. Really thought that the Lord was kind of calling me to priesthood. So right out of high school, the Diocese of Austin was, my parents had moved to Texas by the time I was in high school. The Diocese of Austin discerned to take me on as a seminarian. So I was a seminarian for the diocese for about 5 years, became an acolyte, received minor orders, et cetera, et cetera. I guess I was a slow discerner because I was in there for a while.
Yeah.
I wish I had, it's all in the Lord's timing, right? So I was in there, and then really through that process kind of discerned out and kind of had been involved in the young adult ministry. I experienced YCP for the first time in 2015. They established a chapter in Austin, Texas. We had a big kickoff event, that kind of thing. So that was kind of my inroads into YCP, and but was really involved at my local parish in Austin, St. Mary's Cathedral in Austin. Kind of kickstarted a young adult ministry with another friend whom actually just passed away on Monday. So keep him in your prayers. Michael Shattle is his name.
Yeah.
Former Focus missionary.
How old was he?
He's 33. So my age. But so that's kind of, and then really kind of career-wise, decided to do, I've been in fundraising for about a decade now. Most of that has been consulting. I used to work for the largest consultancy in the fundraising space, about 800 employees, and now, as of about 7-8 weeks ago, decided to go out on my own. So kind of run a small shop called Impact House Media. We do marketing, we do media, and then we also do fundraising now. So we kind of one-stop shop for all of your nonprofit solutions. Kind of quick story about Impact House Media. We went through a rebrand last summer and kind of launched in last January, kind of the rebrand. But I think at this point about 80% of our clients are Catholic, but 20% of them are not, right? And it's kind of an interesting mix of dealerships and executive speakers and insurance companies. Then every once in a while, we'll get a referral and people will be like, why are we working? Because Catholic used to be in our name. People are like, why are we working with this Catholic group? Like, we're just an insurance company, right? So I think that was kind of a little bit of a pain point for folks. So when we were discerning kind of a rebrand in our name, kind of decided to go with Impact House Media. So it's an acronym for IHM, so Immaculate Heart of Mary. So still a nod towards our Catholic faith, but it's kind of one of those things. If you know, you know, and if you don't, it just sounds like a cool name, which it is.
That's right.
So yeah, and then so my wife's family's from Louisville, and that's kind of how I ended up here. I think my youngest son, Colby Guadalupe, is like an 8th generation Louisvillian. So my in-laws have like a 200-year-old plus graveyard plot. They told me that after the wedding, right? So I'm like, oh, you guys already figured that. Yeah, you guys already figured that out.
Guess that's where you're being married.
I'm like, okay, great. But yeah, excited to be here in Louisville. And yeah, this is a city with a lot of like deep Catholic roots. Very proud of its, I think particularly its Catholic education. People ask you where you went to school, and they mean more oftentimes than not Catholic school, at the very least high school, right?
Right. It's usually not your college education.
That's right. So yeah, happy to be here.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, it's a gift to have you, Jose, and have you, Greg, because I know there's, like you said, there's deep Catholic roots here, and great Catholic families. We just want to really build that church up in a way that people know who is out there, know what organizations to connect to, and the value of building community. I think that's one thing that a lot of people don't know all the time, how to do that, especially in some of our parishes that depending on where you go, like there might be a lot of people at your parish, but there's not a lot of community or not a great sense of belonging, because I think with social media and just the breakdown of the family and different marriage situations, there has been maybe a feeling of loss, a lot of the lack of formation in the church. People don't know their faith, don't know where they came from, and they don't know each other. It used to be when you sat next to someone in the pew, you had no problem saying, hey, how you doing? They know about your life. Now it's like you don't even look at each other. How do we solve that problem, especially for young people just coming into the church today? And, they have great careers, they're in the secular world, but they want to live their faith, but they don't know how to bring their skills that they're gaining in the secular world into the church, because there's no community, there's no momentum, there's no vision.
Yeah, I would say, so at a high level, YCP, Young Catholic Professionals, exists for a lot of the same reasons apostolates throughout the world exist, which we're in the saint-making business. Okay, that's at our core, that's what we're trying to do, and we're trying to normalize, these are my words, okay, we're normalizing our faith and allowing it to be okay to talk about how we advanced our careers and our profession, leveraging the virtues from our faith and making it okay to integrate the two in a way that's safe. And the Catholic Church does a phenomenal job of tradition and the sacraments to tee up, especially coupled with their education, teeing kids up to go into college. You've got programs like Focus that are there to support Catholics who are trying to live their faith in college. YCP is there to be that baton pass to live out their careers with others in a community. And everything you just described, John, is the exact problems that we're facing to grow YCP. I'm just being transparent. Mm-hmm. We've been around since March, 10th, 2020.
Oh gosh, the weekend of the lockdown.
It was fun. It was a great
Welcome
week.
to Louisville.
It was a great week. Yeah. And so it's been a ride, and I'm pleased to say with people like Jose and others on the leadership team, where we're trying to go, I think is really amazing. The goal we have today is to touch, grab, embrace those Catholics who grew up in the faith, but maybe today find themselves showing up at Easter and Christmas. Maybe they don't know how to say the Hail Mary, but they long for it, and they're looking for that opportunity to show up and be around others that could help them in their own faith journey. And that is our challenge, that we're for ourselves, for where we go from to quietly but ardently evangelize with YCP and have that life, spirit, integration with work, and I think if we get more of that, we're going to be a better community. I think we're going to raise saints.
Yeah.
And we're fighting sports culture, everything you said, social media. It's just too easy to stay home. Forget it. I'm just going to stay home. Or I'm going to receive communion and I'm just going to walk right home. I'm just walk right out the door.
Yeah.
And so all of that is the same. We're all fighting that same fight. And that's my perspective. I don't know what you think.
Yeah, no, and I agree. We're coming up on our 5th year anniversary here in March, right? And I think this year, as Greg has said, I think we've really done, if you look at like year-over-year numbers, right? I think our attendance is up like 90%, something like that, right? The goal 1A is getting people together, right? And like, what is that next step, right? I love kind of like Focus's kind of motto, right? Like, kind of call, build, send, right? So I feel like we're calling people. People are coming. People are being invited. I kind of see like the 5-year anniversary as kind of that next step, right? Like, how are we calling people? How are we building people? And then from there, sending them out, right? One of my favorite things about Louisville is, I've told many people this, is I feel like every fourth like Catholic man that I meet in the city is like either a recent revert or a recent convert. So there's a lot of energy here. There's a lot of zeal. I feel like the Lord is doing a lot here. And I think, and then and everyone kind of has their place in how they do that. But with just our reach, I think that there's a lot of potential in the work that YCP does and building disciples. So I think we've in some ways have checked off that first box, but kind of I think as we look at year 5, right, how do we take that next step?
Our job is to provide value to them. We almost look at it like a private enterprise. This organization, it's a really amazing platform that we're leveraging. And how do we provide members and attendees the value? And they're going to spend an hour and a half out of their day to come at 7:00 and network and connect and listen to an amazing speaker and stick around and then come again and bring someone else because they were enriched in some way. And so that's always a focus every single time for us to think of what we do through that lens. So,
So I can't help but think I have many thoughts. So, pardon the potential disjointedness, but I keep thinking as you guys are talking about the fact that one of those fundamental pieces of the lay life, as the church articulates it, is this call to sanctify the secular, right? So lay people, we kind of have this terrible habit as Catholics sometimes where we think, well, for lay people to be holy, then they need to be more like the priests. And, then the priests seem to want to be more like the lay people, and everything's backwards, right?
Yeah, there's a lot of confusion.
So obviously, like authentic living of your vocation and your state in life is really important. And so, John and I both work in ministry. So as far as, our living out of at least our current call to sanctify the secular seems pretty cut and dried, right? Like we do for a living, and that's direct ministry. That's not most lay people, right? And so what I'm curious to get your thoughts on is, one, practically, how does a layperson sanctify the workplace by their presence, by their witness? And two, where do you see YCP kind of fitting into that equation?
Yeah, I have some thoughts. It's a common statement that Catholics don't wear their faith on their sleeve. They live it through their example. And I think that's I grew up that way as well. And I think that's great. I think there's a lot of missed opportunities where we don't see the opportunity to have a virtuous experience with other people. They experience us in a way where there's virtue and beauty in that interaction. And They're inspired by us through our leadership style, our compassion. We use vernacular and rhetoric like the word grace. I use that in every staff meeting. We got to give grace because we need grace. And you know immediately when I just said that there's something a little unique or different about me than most leaders. Yep. Okay, but I didn't go out there and do adoration with my entire office, right? So in those little ways, we have the opportunity to create impact and to again normalize the fact that your faith can be lived at work in a way that's not like two different worlds. And if you show up with your faith like here and present, and you, by virtue of having gone through the sacraments and you're attending mass, and then you show up at work like it's all one thing, you can do a little bit more than just be a good example, I think. And so YCP is trying to say, oh, I didn't know you were a Catholic. And there's a network of making it okay to recognize that you're seeking something else, because we're all sinners and we all need help. And we provide mentoring, we provide career mentoring support as well for those who want it and seek it out, and unveiling how we live our life through our everyday life. It's kind of high levels. I try to give some specifics there, but I don't know if you have anything else to add to that.
I mean, I think just kind of to that question, right? I think, when you look at kind of what the church has said about the place of the laity, right? It says, it's probably not Regnum Novarum. One of the documents, it says, the place of the laity is to enhance civil society, right? So what does that look like, right? So how are we doing that? I think in a lot of ways, I think we have to see our work as sanctifying, right, and necessary for our salvation. And then, if we see it through that paradigm, I think that really does change things. At least for myself personally, it isn't like a necessary evil, but rather like a piece that is part of the economy of salvation, right? And like, how are we living out that faith in the work that we do? And I think it does, when we just kind of think about like leadership styles, I think about myself, right? I feel like I've adopted a servant leadership style. And in a lot of ways, it's because that's how, Jesus led, right? So I think that really does inform. And then people do really recognize, hey, giving grace or being more attentive or like checking in with folks as things happen. I think folks do notice. And I think that's kind of how we can kind of live out our vocation in the workplace.
Jose said something that just reminded me, our patron saint is Saint Joseph the Worker. And so
that's appropriate.
you stop for a second, and if you close your eyes and you say, okay, imagine Saint Joseph the Worker, a quiet, humble, dutiful, hardworking, foster father, right. And over protector of our Heavenly Mother. And so through work, you can do amazing things that you don't have to be the CEO of a company to have an impact. Yeah. And there's a lot of different ways you can have that. And anyone who's in a profession has the ability to help others find sainthood, not just their own work on their own salvation. So I think I was reminded of our patron saint when listening to Jose.
Yeah. I feel like there's this misunderstanding a lot of people have when it comes to their jobs, their careers, their work, is that, I'm made for work. Well, that's not really the case. We're not made for whatever job we get. That job, that work was made for us. Like God gave that to us to fulfill us, to give us a sense of, bodily confidence, like that our bodies are being put to good use and not like a cog in the wheel, right? But there's purpose, there's meaning. It's fulfilling, whether it's manual labor or even, computer science, whatever that kind of stuff is.
That's right.
The problem is the Industrial Revolution, I think, has made a lot of people feel like their careers are the most important thing in the world, and that's their only value. So, like, I think it can make people feel like they don't have a lot of time for family. So how do people in the secular workforce like maybe resist against or be an example to many of these companies but kind of buy into that culture of constant productivity and sometimes to the neglect of family life with the lack of paternity or maternity leave or issues like that can really cause strain and tension within families.
I don't know how someone, let's just say someone brought up with the Catholic faith, or even someone who hasn't, who doesn't attend daily mass and receive the sacraments, and is not part of YCP or any other apostolate, or doesn't show how they come to that realization you just described. Like, I just don't know how that happens unless it's through some sort of divine intervention where there's an aha moment, or there's an event, a life event. And so, I think it's by being around organizations like this and attending and being present. And that comes because something in your soul is telling you you need to show up. You need to get up a little bit earlier. You need to be present and listen. And it takes sometimes people time to find that devotion or that thing that they're doing to get to their why and their what, not just like their and how they do that. You've heard of that statement: why, how, what. Mm-hmm. But I don't know if the what at the end of the day matters. Like, does anybody care that I'm a structural engineer? Like, really? Like, I do think God gave me I'm doing exactly what God, I think, had in mind for me, but could I have been doing it in a different sector of something else in a similar vein? Probably. But no one really, at the end of the day, we all go to this end of the same place. Mm-hmm. What we ultimately do, what our profession is, does it really matter versus along the way? Who did you impact and whose lives did you touch and inspire along the way? At the end of the day, again, St. Joseph the Worker, pray for us. Now, it wasn't matter. It didn't matter that he was, in the carpentry business. So anyway, that's my take.
Yeah, I think a lot of it, I think to kind of Greg's point, I think like to get to that point, I think you need a paradigm shift, right? You need Jesus, right? And that's really what shifts you from, prioritizing things, right? God, family, work, right? I can speak for myself personally. I think some of you guys would see me. I bought a house here like a year and 3 months ago. I was really only here on the weekends.
Right, you were up in Chicago, right?
Traveling Monday through Friday to Chicago.
Intense.
And I think it was great, right? Being promoted to VP, I went to the largest consultancy in the country, managing a few $1 million in contracts. But, at one point, I just kind of had to make a decision of like, and there was a lot of other things like cultural alignment and partial acquisition and stuff like that in the background. But at the end of the day, I think like one has to make that decision of what is my priority? Yeah. Is there a way by which I can essentially do what I was doing, or, can I do the same kind of thing in a different way, right? I think it comes down to a personal decision, right? At the end of the day, am I, and I think it comes with some sacrifice, but I think like I've kind of come to the realization that, right now, like I said, just started kind of my own thing. And it's interesting, just even in the first few weeks, just kind of, in the process of knocking on doors, slinging proposals. I just have a lot more time with my kids, more than 48 hours like I did during the week. Although there's been peaks and valleys, I feel like I'm telling my wife this like every 3 days. I'm like, I don't know. It's like contracts, right? You never know where your next contract's going to come from. So you got to knock on 10 doors before you find a lead or whatever. You don't know where the next thing is going to come from. But at the end of the day, I'm here with my wife, my kids, my dog Linus, right? And I feel like every 3 days I'm telling my wife, like, our family life has never been better. That stuff matters more than titles, than money, right? And I think it comes down to personal decision, right? It comes down to personal decision, and it comes down to what is the kind of thing that you want to do, and a little bit of a paradigm shift of maybe taking some losses here for some wins here.
And that's got to be hard because, there's tremendous pressure, especially when you work for a company that large with the potential for that kind of success and promotion. Like, how do you make that decision? If not, for the strength and foundation of your faith that gives you the confidence that no matter how much money you make, how many promotions you have, you could still end up with nothing at the end of your life.
It'd be a shell of a man.
Yeah.
There's been several times we've looked at what YCP is doing to say, are we effective? Is this working? And the devil wants us to fail. And there's been many times my wife, she did to me last night. So like, where do you think this is going? She had, it's like, we gonna, and I said, it's happening. And if it was easy, it would have been done by now. And this is hard work, and we're fighting everything you're describing. And I don't think it's a YCP problem so much as it is we're all these other poles and to detract us, including work. So we're trying to say, look, we know work is important to you. You can do both. And sometimes I think people too feel like because they haven't been to mass or they haven't been to confession maybe since they were in fourth grade, honestly, there is whatever whatever it is, there is a very deep, steep barrier for them to just start up in their faith again. It can be hard because of the weight of what they're bearing. And so if we can figure out a way, like I was referring to earlier, to say it's okay, come be part of this, just listen, you'll be inspired, and through their career and through their work and the integration with their faith and other people, we're trying to, again, raise saints and integrate that.
Yeah, and I think in a secular society, right, like if you consider yourself Catholic or even like Catholic adjacent, like whatever that means, I'm not gonna go down that rabbit hole.
That's a big tangent.
But I think like oftentimes, like it's been my experience that like folks just like maybe they grew up praying or they grew up going to mass or Easter, Christmas, but still identify as Catholic, right? I think in large part is because, and they are curious, but like have not like taken that step forward. I think a lot of the times it's because they've not like had an encounter with another person who is a peer, who is into their faith, who is normal, who is, but still like, fully bought in for Christ, right?
Yeah.
So I think that's kind of one of the great things that YCP provides is a network, a place where everyone could gather and be like, hey, there's another 20-some-year-old that, I didn't even knew worked at Humana as well or whatever, right? Who is at the very least a trying Catholic or curious or that kind of a thing, right? So I think it's a great network for that, right? And I think like when you look at kind of the landscape of especially like young adults, but then also too, right? When you look at there's recent research on like the clergy and like what some of their pain points are. Oftentimes it's like trust. Oftentimes it's community. We know that we did a survey last year of, why do people come to YCP? And the number one response was for community, right? And I think that's not just a Catholic thing. I think it's beyond,
it's human,
right? There's I think especially now with just the gadgets, the screens, right? It's easy to fill your day with non-human interaction and to be lonely. And that's just like a demographic thing. But YCP is providing a space for people to gather, for people to like rub elbows with someone else and have a conversation about their faith. Because most of us, right, spend most of our day at work, right? How does our faith inform that? And I think that's kind of one of the and that's why people keep coming. That's why we've seen the growth of people coming again and again.
Where do you find these people? Like they're not all coming to church, so like there has to be other places. Like what practical ways do you take? Like steps do you take to invite people outside of the pews on Sunday?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think one of the things I think we did intentionally this year was I think we went from a shift in announcement to invitation. And I think that's really been bearing out fruit, right? I was just at a mission planning meeting the other day and they were like, no one filled out our survey. And I think a lot of that just kind of comes down to methodology, especially as a fundraiser, kind of natural sales guy. I mean, if I knock on 100 doors and say something in a certain way, yeah, but if you shift the way that you say it, if you personally invite someone, if you present a value proposition to someone of why this is important and why you should go, I think that's has bared fruit this year. And, it's interesting. At our last YCP event, I think, we're starting to see, at least I am anecdotally starting to see people who maybe came to their first YCP event, let's say a year ago, and then maybe came once every quarter. I noticed last time, one of those people, brought a friend, right? So like they're finding that valley, they're bringing friends. So I think a lot of that comes down to a shift from announcement to invitation, right? I mean, it was interesting, especially in thinking about the nonprofit world, right? People often say, I'm not getting donors, I'm not getting volunteers. And my very first question is like, what are you saying? What are you doing? How are you doing that? Are you just spraying and praying? Because more often times than not, that's not going to work, right? Put a hand in someone else's hand, have a conversation. Have that human interaction, that human touch is paramount. And I think we've been doing that more so. I think we could be better at that. And I think this kind of 5th year anniversary really, I think, is going to kind of, we kind of had the wet blanket of COVID, as everyone else did. I think it's going to, from my perspective, I kind of feel like it's going to be a relaunch of the relaunch, right? And really get our voice out there.
That's exciting. It's really exciting.
Yeah. Word of mouth has been the most successful. Honestly, people who have relocated to Louisville and were part of a YCP in another city, or they're like, hey, I want to get connected to other people kind of like me. What is that organization? We found a lot of success through that. I think in the spirit of us wanting to give value to them, so they want them to come back, want to become members, we have to add value. One of the barriers we have is other professional organizations that are secular, that there's a quid pro quo of, well, I'm part of that because I'm going to get something out of it for my career. You have to come really to YCP because you're going to get something out of it spiritually. And that's asking a lot for some people. So you kind of have to, give it to God and allow them to be inspired to come. And I think we're at a step change moment, as Jose's describing, in the next 5 years, to allow this to catch fire, and everyone who's attended ever in Louisville to really propel this to what it could be. I'm trying to imagine a community without YCP. Like, what is Louisville's strategy without a YCP? Right now, there's a lot of young adult ministries. There's young adult gatherings, groups that are out there, which is great. Like, those should coexist. But big picture, where is the beacon and the north pointed for grabbing these 20-somethings and 30-somethings, technically 21 to 40? And yes, if you're a stay-at-home parent, you're welcome to as well. You're a professional parent.
That's right.
You're welcome to come too. So
it's so critical. These things, I think, are so oftentimes forgotten. Like, sometimes people don't have any strategy. They don't feel like they have a story. There is no vision, and they can get lost in that world. But yet, I think YCP and organizations like you attempt to give people their story back, bring community alive again when maybe it's died in their parish or their school or even in their family, right? It's hard to do that, though. It just takes time.
It does. And again, applying the for-profit world mindset has been a huge help for how we're tackling this. I think if we just looked at this as we're a humble nonprofit just trying to do some good, I don't think we would be where we are today. And so that's another interesting aspect of YCP is we're deploying that as part of the saint-making goal. So,
what are some of the biggest events and things that you all have had the past 5 years that you are most proud of, and things that you hope to do in the future that are going to attract more people?
So,
speaking of strategy,
yeah, no, it's really good. So the types of events that we put on, there's a variety of them. Typically, the types are 3 or 4 buckets. So the most common bucket is we have networking, happy hour, and a speaker event, followed by more happy hour networking time together. And that guest speaker is an authentically and ardently Catholic person in our community who's got a very inspiring story to tell. And through that, there's inspiration and connection. We have panel discussions where we have 3 or 4 people come together, talk about a specific topic, and we'll do breakouts and conversation that way. We will have happy hour / social hour / which I think you'll probably agree, one of the most successful ones recently was Churchill Downs evening, which was really cool. I was actually a little skeptical, I'll be honest. I was a skeptical but quiet board member, just say, hey, we're going to try this and let the leadership team do that. And it was a big success.
Tons of people there,
Yeah.
Wow.
And so having the array of both being inspired, but also having connection, and being around other successful Catholics is kind of the secret sauce of the types of events that we put on. They're every month, and ycplouisville.org. You can check out there. The next event is actually a holiday Christmas party. It's an ugly sweater party.
Yep, that's the theme. Yeah, it's a contest, I believe.
Contest at Upland Brewing. And then in January, actually, Archbishop Fobb will be the guest speaker.
Oh, wow. That's awesome. That's awesome.
For what it's worth, I'll say to get this off the ground in 2019 to 2020, it required some benefactors. And the Archdiocese was 50% of our getting off the ground seed money. And for that, we'll always be grateful. And their support is vital for YCP, frankly, in any city, Louisville or any others, to have that connection. So we're just grateful for that, connection.
All part of building community.
Yeah. 100%.
Sure.
It's huge.
What's been your, I don't know, most favorite or most you think is most successful?
Yeah, I really like just chatting with people. So really like any opportunity where I can just have a conversation with folks. I do think just kind of reflecting on, I think I really liked our last speaker. I think someone said something along the lines of, how did you get into hospital, like operational management? And I think he said something really good. He said something along the lines of like, I didn't even know that this field existed until I was like 28. So he's like, kind of just telling kind of the young professionals there, like, if you feel like you're not doing the right thing, if you feel like you don't know what you're doing, like, take this advice. Like, I didn't always know that this is what I wanted to do. So a little bit of professional patience there. And then, when we reflect on like the lives of the saints, I think it's easy to think about like, okay, he just went from being born to being awesome, right? And that's just not the case, right? We look at we look at scriptures.
My mother told me something else. My mother said something else.
You look at scriptures, right? You look at the story of, specifically, I think of St. Paul, right? He talks about stepping away and praying after his conversion for 5 years. I think when we often think about St. Paul, we often think of like the final product, right? But a lot of the great saints are like that, right? Anthony of the Desert, Ignatius of Loyola. There's a lot of patience, a lot of, giving ourselves to the Lord, right? I mean, even just looking at the Lord's work, right? He didn't start his public ministry until he was 30, right? So I thought that was great advice. I thought it was probably pretty on the nose for people even today, I would say it probably lacks some professional patience. So I think it's just a good reminder of everything in God's time, everything in his will. So
again, Jose's making me think of another parallel to this is that if you don't have your faith and you're just working, you think what your journey is very unique and you're alone and you got to figure it out. And the reality is someone else has already gone through something similar. There's a lot of wisdom out there, but you have to surround yourself with, you have to have the foresight, emotional intelligence, wisdom, and maybe some graces to know that you need help. And that's organizations like YCP, and YCP is not the only one, to even just help you on that journey to even realize that I think of all the people that didn't have a YCP in that moment to be inspired to like, oh, actually, I'm not alone in this. Like someone else has gone through this too. So, but it takes people just putting themselves out there to get involved, to surround it with community. So
That's definitely a thing. Because I look at there as a relationship between evangelization and discipleship, right? And sometimes we look at them as the same thing, and they're similar, right? But what I found is there's thresholds of conversion, right? There's people that don't have any trust in the church or in God or in Christ at all. But then as time goes on, maybe they soften their heart a little bit, and there's a little bit of trust that grows, maybe forgiveness or seeing things differently because they meet somebody that shows them a different perspective. And then naturally a curiosity wells up in their heart, and then they're seeking, and then they're, at a certain point though, they have to make a decision, right? Like, how am I going to live? Am I going to live differently? Am I going to continue walking down this path? Yeah. And that decision leads to, this discipleship lifestyle that you eventually become a commissioned disciple yourself because of the transformation of conversion that you've gone through. So that then you make disciples and you become a spiritual multiplier where many people follow through that. But like, how do you guide people from showing up to an event to becoming an on-fire Catholic disciple, living their faith and drawing all kinds of other people to you, to Christ ultimately?
Yeah. I think honestly, just kind of reflecting, again, shout out to my friend Michael, and just like thinking about the church, yesterday was a feast day of St. Ignatius St. Francis Xavier, sorry. Getting my Jesuits mixed up here. And, when you think about him, and there's various examples of this, but you look, there was often like clusters of saints, right? Like, hey, this guy was spiritual director of this guy. And that's how they knew each other, right? I think about kind of the great things that were happening at the University of Paris, right? Thinking about St. Ignatius being a student there, thinking about St. Francis Xavier being a student there, a handful of others. I'm like, what an amazing time to be a student at the University of Paris, right? So I think step one is like, and I think this is how the Lord works, and is gathering folks, right? When you gather folks, the Lord works in community. Charisms rise up from that gathering. And then, every community, I feel like, is called to like discern what that is, and then give that back to someone, right? And maybe in some scenarios that is like religious orders, right? But I think in our scenario, right, like what does that look like, right? Like, is that like a community of intentionally prayerful families? Is that a group of guys that gather every Saturday, right? So I think that step one, I think we're doing that at YCP, is getting people together. And I think that step two is, as I said, I think kind of discerning what those charisms are. Some of that is individually, some of that is in community. But I am, speaking as someone who has had 2 friends pass in the last 10 days, just like the Lord does everything. Providence and the Lord leads. There's not a thing that he has not have his finger on. So just having this deep confidence that the Lord is rising up saints today, he's calling saints today, and having that trust to kind of step forward and see what he's asking, right? So I think we're kind of getting there, right? So I guess that's a roundabout way of saying, like, I think every kind of group, every community kind of has its own particular identity by which they are sent. And it takes prayer, it takes a lot of elbow rubbing, and discernment to push that forward.
I like that. It starts with prayer, but then when you gathered people in prayer, you get to know each other, and then you discern how you can guide this person deeper, or offer these gifts, or pull those gifts out of another person. It just takes a relationship.
Yeah,
that's good. Great.
We're in a position today too where we to build this community, it takes others who want to lead, like Jose and the leadership team and a board. And so first of all, if anybody knows of someone who's interested in joining the leadership team or the board, we'd love to talk to them, without a doubt. And I think being part of this, you learn about yourself. It's a pretty giving group that by which you earn your graces out of. But Yeah, I think the YCP enables this group of people, the leadership team, the board, and the attendees to add value via grace and example and virtue to allow people to live their work life and their home life, and spiritual life. It's all one. It's all one thing, and it's all in the spirit of trying to get to heaven. So, what's your opinion on what we can do for Louisville? I mean, I'm curious. Like, the 21 to 40-year-old demographic in Louisville is a huge one. Don't get me started on how many graduates we've had out of the Catholic education system in Louisville. Like, what do you guys think? You guys are asking us our opinion about this.
Hey, you're our guests. You know, we're the ones that usually ask the questions.
I put it back on you. What do you guys think?
Well, I don't know, and I've struggled for a while now, just kind of mulling this all over. Like I alluded to earlier, there is a certain sense in which I personally have a detachment from the idea of living as a secular lay professional, if that makes sense, because we just work in the church directly, and that does give you that sense. So there is that sense in which my way of living out my vocation to sanctify the world as a layperson is, in my particular case, a little bit clearer.
Right.
But what is really hard, and I'm sure you guys see this a lot and almost certainly experience it yourselves, because I think we all do, is this reality of, well, there's all these competing demands in life.
Yep.
Well, there's work, and then there's the time I need to give my family, and then there's the time I need to give to the Lord, and then maybe there are hobbies or interests or other things, and then there's going to be a community that I'm a part of, hopefully, although that seems to be one of the first things to go when people are cutting things out of their schedule, and so in all that, I know I've certainly felt, even in the ministry work, we don't escape it, is this like this rat race mentality of like you're just going and going and going and going, and there's no time to give to the Lord or to my family or to my community, and so the end result seems to be this really a detachment from the things that are most important. So, and that came up a little bit in what you guys were saying about, you mentioned St. Joseph the Worker. I think about him as he's St. Joseph the Worker, but he's the earthly father of Jesus first, right? And his work is secondary, of course not meaning unimportant. So this is not an answer to your question at all.
No, it's a good perspective.
But I'm like working it through as why do we struggle so much with concupiscence? Okay, fine. But the ordering of our priorities and making time for prayer, and you know what I mean? Like,
I don't want to cut you off, but I agree with you. At the end of the day, people make time for that which is important to them, period. I don't care what it is. And so my personal struggle that I get frustrated with is I just go, you can only lead a horse. You can't lead a horse to water.
You can lead a horse to water. You can't make him drink.
So it's like, how do we even just get them? How do we just show them, hey, the water's over here, and then get them to drink? Like this is a tough business that we're in.
Yeah. Especially when people are conditioned to drinking out of a cesspool. Right? And that's one of the problems. And they're so accustomed to it, they don't even realize what they're doing.
Yeah, and it's work for me to walk over to get that drink that actually I'm drinking this stuff over here and it tastes good.
It's like Plato's allegory of the cave. That story of these these people they spend their entire lives just staring at a black wall with shadows dancing on it, and they think that's the reality of the world.
Yeah.
And they're fed, they're comfortable, everything's great, but they're slaves, they're chained, right?
That's way better than the horse analogy.
Yeah,
Thank you.
But this is how you reach 21 to 40-year-olds. Like, this is it. Like, they're living in this dark world of, this opaque curtain where they can't see beyond. It's materialism, right? And then when you have an encounter with Christ, when you see the beyond, when you start to see the world through the sacramental worldview, everything becomes technicolor, vibrant, alive. And you want to then share that with others. But people who are still living in this complacent comfort, this darkness, they're going to resist it. That's the problem. So you want to invite them, but they might feel like they're being threatened. And I think that's what I felt when I was going through my conversion, because my mom also looked at me and said, "So this is your faith now, John?" And I was like, I grew up Catholic. I thought we were Catholic. I was trying to live my faith out. And I think my mom, it just shocked my parents how much I cared about Jesus all of a sudden, because I was going through my major conversion, right? Then I started getting a little used to it and stopped freaking people out, right? So I think when you first convert or revert, you can be a little overwhelming for people. And so, like, if you are...
Just you, John.
Maybe just me, right? whatever. Or you have a zeal that you need to learn how to temper. And when you have tempered that and integrated it into your daily life, you're going to be more effective. I've found that reaching people my age, you do so not at a lecture or a course. I mean, maybe if they come.
John, you're 62, right? You're
62.
Okay.
About half that.
Your wisdom.
Right. But it's this idea of, just having a casual conversation at the barbecue, or wherever you happen to be. Yeah. And it's through that normal relationship that you draw them in. They want to know, what do you have that I'm missing, right?
Yeah. Did you have thoughts?
It's just a few, I guess. When I think about, what is that? I do think it's like a conversion, right? I think about just that image of St. Francis kind of reminded me as I walked in through the door. Read The Life of St. Francis by St. Bonaventure. Talks about this encounter that St. Francis had with someone that had leprosy, right? And, kind of St. Francis is kind of in this in-between spot where he's like, I'm all in or I'm not, right? And he's always kind of been repulsed by folks with leprosy. And then this particular instance, decided to embrace his leper, right? St. Bonaventure writes, and St. Francis said, and it was in this moment that what used to be sweet became sour. What used to be sour became sweet. And I don't think we do that. It's the Lord that does that, right? So I think back to providence, knowing that He is doing that. But I think also I do think the Holy Spirit works in pairs, right? So I think it's about that invitation. It's about calling people together. It's about having those casual conversations, right? I've been in my neighborhood for about, bought a house for a year. I've only been living it for 3 months or whatever. But, we're starting to develop a community of folks with kids that kind of live on our street. We've had movie nights at our backyard. And, I think, I've had neighbors preface what they say to me in ways that are like, well, Jose, well, I'm not religious, and this is what happened. I'm like, oh, great. I didn't ask if you were.
I'm sorry.
Right? But I think, just kind of back to kind of pastoral theology 101, right? Like, people only start caring about what you say until they know that you care, right? And I think that's step one. And I think you do that enough. Pray about that enough. Of reliance on God. Like, God is the one that does the sweet to the sour and the sour to the sweet, right? It's not us.
And I think it helps the church become more open to investing in young people. I think when you see young people living the way they live, or the passivity or the complacency that they seem to have nowadays, and it's been a gradual process, so it's been hard and almost imperceptible to some that this has even been happening, because it's just, there's always that, oh, kids these days mentality, right? But it has progressively gotten worse. And I think part of that is the culture, but another part of that is the culture of the church not investing in young people because there's a lack of trust in young people. Like, oh, they don't care. They're not coming. Where are they? There are no kids in the neighborhood, whatever it might be. And now, but we certainly have our Catholic schools K through 8, right? Or our high schools until they're 18. But as soon as they get a car and a job, they're gone. Mm-hmm. And then we don't invest in them again until they're married with kids, maybe, or they're dying. Like there's this discrepancy. And I heard a statistic once, and I don't know exactly the accuracy of it, but even just the principle of it, the philosophical concept to me is just as legitimate. If a parish invested 90% of its time, talent, and treasure into the demographics 16 to 29 or 18 to 40, whatever it is, it would completely transform the church, because these are the people who are searching. They have the energy, they have the enthusiasm, the joy. And when you feed them and they're filled full, they're going to feed everyone else and all the other demographics with joy and passion and zeal. And then as they get older, they're going to be the ones who invest in future generations, right? How do you do that? It's a paradigm shift for everyone.
Yeah, and YCPs, we're not so, I'll just say the word cocky to think that like we're here to save.
We're the answer.
We're the answer to all.
You're part of this massive puzzle piece.
We're one
right?
puzzle. We're a couple puzzle pieces. And there's a demographic and a key target audience that we're set up for to help propel them to go from here to here in the times and the moments they're with us, to be enriched, inspired. And, there's a lot of work to be done. And that's why you need the sacraments. That's why we got to pray. And I don't know how God does it. I get overwhelmed trying to think about how God manages all of it, and that's another podcast.
Yeah, and you just have one little piece. Same here, man. We work with Family Renewal Project, and that's enough for us. We can't take more than that. But it's good to collaborate and be open to all this, and what we do with Spirit Inspire in this show is a gift to those who watch it, and hopefully that you all can share this episode with everyone when it comes out, and they can spread far and wide, right? And if there's any particular parts of this episode that you would love to really make into a clip, let us know, because we'd love to put that out for others as well, because that would be really, really great.
Awesome.
Anything that really came to mind. But any closing thoughts, other shameless plugs you want to throw out there?
YCPLouisville.org.
Yeah.
Just come. You don't have to come forever. Just come for one meeting and see what you like. And we'd like to let people's feedback on what's working well and what's not. There's an opportunity to serve and if you have ideas and you want to give back in some way that's meaningful, that's another avenue. And then we're looking for leaders in our community. That's a whole other podcast talking about people that are over 40 that are not showing up. They're not showing up at the parishes. They're not showing up to help. And they're in the ways that they were, let's just say, like the good old days in the 80s, as I like to talk to my father-in-law about all the time. And so we're looking for help, and it's not a huge burden, but if there's something out in there that's calling you to give back in some meaningful way, know that this is a place to engage with us. So we'd love to meet with you.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Was that? Anything?
Yeah, no. I think, if you've not come to a YCP event in a while, I think it probably looks different than what you remember it. So invite you to come back, come to an event. Christmas party's a great one. Bring your sweater.
That's right.
Yeah.
On it, so
That looks great. Thank you guys for being here.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, thank you.
Including us, inviting us.
Yeah, and we'll see how it goes. So.
Yeah. Awesome.
All right. Well, everyone, thank you so much for watching. Be sure to like and subscribe, as always. Force the algorithms to proclaim the gospel in some way, as we always like to say. And continue to pray for us. Pray for YCP as they prepare to celebrate their 5-year anniversary. Let that be a great launching pad for them. And come to their events. It's a great gift to continue to seek community, but also build community. And then once you've found it, to invest in it, right? To invest in community and good friendships. So with that, we'll see you next time on another episode of Spirit Inspire. God bless you.